This video is part of a tutorial series on using the Visual Authentication Journey Builder. It will focus on building a basic policy from scratch that includes sign-in, sign-up, and password reset, as well as handling a user migration case where users are required to reset their password on first-time login after migration. To start out, we will create a new empty project in the editor. The policy we're creating will begin with a sign-in, sign-up component. We'll map the user's email to the sign-in name claim, and we'll also enable links for a forgot password and create new account or sign-up route. This will automatically add components as children of the sign-in, sign-up node. Now we'll add a submit action. The form submit action on the sign-in component runs when the user takes the sign-in route, entering their email and password and continuing. So we'll add a username password validation component to validate the user's entered email and password. However, some users may be freshly migrated users. And in this case, they shouldn't go through this validation, but instead take an alternative route. We'll assume that an extension attribute has been added to Azure Active Directory with a flag to indicate that the user is migrated and requires a password reset. But we'll have to add that extension attribute in our editor project as well. We'll go to the claims menu. Claims aren't the same thing as an AAD attribute, but we'll want to have a claim to store the flag value in within our policy as well. We'll assume that the extension attribute has already been configured outside the scope of this authentication journey, but that it's called password reset required. We'll create a claim with the same name in the claims editing menu here, and also add a display name. The display name is a requirement, but it can be fairly arbitrary if the claim is never going to be shown to the user, like this one. We select the data type of the claim, and we could select a user input type, but again, this claim won't be shown to the user, so we're not going to. The create AAD attribute option will automatically also add an AAD attribute to the project, corresponding to the same ID as the claim ID here for an extension attribute. That matches what we're doing in this case, and we chose an ID matching the extension attribute, so we can go ahead and do that. Once we click Add, you can see the claim has been added to the claim list in the editor. If we go to the AAD Attributes tab, we can see that the extension attribute was also created. Now we can go back to the flowchart and back to the sign-in, sign-up, submit action. The first thing we want to do is check whether the user is a freshly migrated user that needs a password reset. So first, we'll read the value of that flag from Active Directory with an AAD read component. We'll index the user based on the email they entered at sign-in, and we'll throw an error if we can't find them. We want to read the extension attribute, and we'll map it to the claim we created to correspond to it. We can add a custom error message if the user doesn't exist, and we'll do that here. This will be displayed to the user if this error is thrown. Now we want to do something different based on whether the flag is set, so we'll make a branch by adding a conditional component. In the conditional component, we'll check whether the password reset required flag was true. If it was true, we're not going to do username password validation because we're going to make them reset their password and verify their email. So here, in that case, we'll just read their object ID. If the flag was not set, this is a regular sign-in, and we want to validate that their username and password are correct credentials. So we'll route it to the username password validation component. On conditional components, if the conditions are true, the true route out from the bottom of the node will be taken in green, and if the conditions are false, the route on the right that produces the red edge in the editor will be taken instead. This does what we want from the submit action for the sign-in component. So now we'll move back to here. The local account sign-in node is the path that will be taken if the user signs in on the sign-in sign-up page. This includes both the validated users and the migrated ones, so we'll have to add a branch here as well, based on the password reset required flag. We can edit the label that components have in the editor here. This can be helpful for distinguishing many components of the same type from each other. If password reset is required, first we'll have the user validate their email address. To do this, we'll add a user input page component that will show a form to the user. Here we can decide attributes that we want the user to enter, along with some special options. We'll use one of those here to enable email validation. We don't want to let the user input a new email, so we'll select validate a previously entered email. We'll select the claim that the email will be assigned to, and also the claim that the email's value will come from. In this case, since it won't change, we'll select sign-in name for both, and we won't allow editing. This will use the email the user entered during sign-in as the email that they'll need to validate. After this, we'll add another form. This one will be used for them to input their new password. So we'll call it something distinctive. Here, we'll select the password as the attribute, the claim value to be set by the user. The password claim has some special options. In this case, we'll require the field and we'll have it be repeated twice so the user can verify it, and we'll enforce some password complexity rules. We'll select these options and state that the password must contain at least 3 characters from at least 3 of the groups of lowercase letters, uppercase letters, numbers, and special characters. We'll also add a length requirement with minimum and maximum character counts for the password. After the user enters their password, we'll actually update the user object in AAD using an AAD update component in the submit action. We'll index the user object by their object ID, which we got during the sign and submit action. And we'll write their password component with their new password. Because this completes the user migration procedure, we also want to unset the user migration flag. So we'll select the extension attribute and we'll be writing the password reset required value to it. In this case, we always want to turn the flag off. So we'll use a default value of false and check the always use default value option. We don't need to do anything with the object ID that could be output by the AAD operation because we already have it for this user. After this reset, the user should be considered logged in. We'll need to read some additional claims to add to the token of user information that we want to include. So we'll add an AAD read after that. We'll find the claims that we want to add to the token that we wouldn't have already. In this case, let's say this is the given name and the surname of the user. In the case where the password doesn't need to be reset, this is a regular sign-in, and they've already validated their username and password. For this reason, in this branch, we'll just go straight to the AAD read of additional claims that we need for the token. After we've read those additional claims, we have everything we need to issue the token for the user. So we'll add the token issuer and select the claims that we want to issue. In this case, that's the object ID as our subject name, the sign-in name, the given name, and the surname. That handles the sign-in path, which includes both regular sign-ins and newly migrated users. Next, we'll add the manual password reset functionality. This path will be taken if the user selects the forgot password link or button on the sign-in sign-up page. we'll rename this component because the sign in sign up page links use the names to label the buttons in the UI displayed to the user. For the forgot password component, the first thing we want to do is have the user enter an email and verify that they own it. So we'll use the validate user's email option of the user form again. In this case, we want them to enter a new email since we don't know what user they are yet. So we'll select allow user to input a new email and store it in the sign-in name claim. We also want to make sure the email is actually a real user. So we'll add a submit action that reads their attempts to read their object ID from AAD using the email they entered. Once they've validated their email, the next thing they need to do is reset their password. This actually will end up using all this exact same functionality that we specified down here on the regular sign-in path. So we'll just connect this component to the reset password component. Next, we need to implement the create new account or sign up path of the policy. We'll name the component sign up so it will appear that way in the UI. Then we need to ask the user for all the fields we'll need to create the new user. So we'll need a password, which will also have the user repeat twice. And we'll also ask for their given name, surname, and the display name. In this case, we'll require all three fields. We also want to collect the user's email, which we'll validate to make sure they own it. Once we've collected this data in this form, we'll then need to actually create the user object in AAD, and we'll use an AAD create component to do this. The AAD create component is very similar in usage to the AAD update component, except that there are a few extra required claims that have to be written. In this case, the key we'll use for the user is their email sign-in name, since we're using email as a unique key for this policy. We have to provide a display name, but we already configured the user input form to also require them to input a display name. We'll also provide the password from the password they entered. Then we can choose additional claims to write in the new AAD user, the given name and surname the user provided. Finally, we'll want to write the object ID of the new user into a claim, which of course we'll use the object ID claim to place it in. This will create a new user, and the new user will which will mean that all of the claims that we need for the token are already present, so we'll connect it directly to the token issuer. This finishes the policy case, so now we can directly run it and test it on the test tenant. Here, I'll log in as an existing user that's not marked for migration. And you'll see that none of the migration-specific forms appeared, and we got a token from the end. If we were to, for example, choose the forgot password option from the sign-up page, we would take that route in the policy. We see this form where the user is prompted for their sign-in email, and then we can send a verification code. This will send a verification code to their email address, which when received, they'll need to enter and verify to be able to continue. Once the user continues from this point, they get a form to reset their password, the one that we specified in the policy. Once this is entered, the policy also proceeds to the token issuer. This sums up the overview of this video. As an exercise, try creating a policy from scratch where the user can sign in, sign up, reset their password, or log in using a one-time passcode sent to their email. There's another link option in the sign-in component to enable an OTP node. You can implement the one-time passcode functionality using the same email validation option of a user input page.